Howdy, I'm Dr. John Rex, and I'm here to answer your burning questions about AMR. I'm sometimes asked about the interaction between the cost of an antibiotic and the antibiotic that gets chosen to treat the patient. And you can clearly imagine there's a little bit of tension around that. If something is more expensive, you've got to want it more badly in some way. And the challenge, particularly with newer antibiotics, is that they are going to have to be relatively expensive by comparison to antibiotics that we've been making for 20, 30, 40 years. And let's just sort of divide this up into two levels of the game. So first, why would a newer antibiotic just have to be more expensive? It's really a function of what it costs to discover the antibiotic and to make small amounts of it. And everything about the initial development of a new antibiotic is expensive. The average cost going from dead stop to 15 years later having a new antibiotic, typical cost of that is in the range of let's call it 1.3, 1.4 billion, B as in boy, billion dollars. And then you've got to add a little bit on the back end of that to deal with the cost of then keeping it on the market, because you got to make the stuff. And that costs money too. So a number that we think is probably reasonably accurate is that on average, you're going to spend $1.7 billion to have a new drug, to discover a new drug and have it on the market for 10 years. It's a lot of money. And particularly if you don't use it very often, if you're going to have the users of the drug pay for the drug, the cost per user is going to have to be relatively high. It's actually so high that it's not feasible for it to work that way. And that's the whole subject of push and pull incentives and the need to pay for antibiotics as if they were fire extinguishers. But the core point is that any new drug is relatively expensive because you're paying back the cost of inventing it. And particularly if it's only used in small volumes, you still have to have a fairly expensive manufacturing facility to make it at all. So particularly if it's something you inject, something you give IV, those are sterile compounds like that. They're just technically more difficult to make. So it costs money to make that new drug. Over time, older drugs become cheaper in part because we have a lot of experience with making them, and you actually are making them in high enough volumes that the cost per unit of the drug goes down. So, that's part A of newer drugs being more expensive. Part B would be the fact that at the level of, let's say, a hospital that has a fixed budget to pay for the drugs, all the drugs, you've got patients in the hospital, got to take care of everybody. They all need various kinds of drugs. If an antibiotic, a dramatically expensive antibiotic, blows the budget for everything else, you can see why that's a problem too. You wouldn't be able to deliver care for most people because you've actually had to burn through your budget for one or two people with more expensive to treat infections. And there's good literature that shows that resistant infections, difficult infections are more expensive. They're more expensive in terms of the drugs. They're more expensive in terms of the care. You've got to isolate the patient. People tend to get sicker with those kinds of infections. So lots of reasons why somebody like that has an increased cost of care. And we've been doing some things over the past few years, the we here being in particular in the United States, the Center for Medicaid Services, CMS, where they've added codes to the way that docs get reimbursed. There's a set of codes that determine how much a hospital gets paid to take care of you. Like if you've got appendicitis, that's one code, you get a certain amount of money. They've recently added codes that say you've got a resistant bacteria. There's a code for that that pays a little bit extra. But still, the antibiotic that you might prefer, the newer one, is going to tend to be more expensive, and you've really got to balance that out. And so the idea of choosing the right antibiotic can at times be the right antibiotic that I can afford. And I'm just going to say that's the case of lots of things in the universe. If I want a flashy new car, I've got to decide, can I afford the flashy new car? How badly do you want it? How badly do you need it? Well, in the case of a new car, if I don't have the flashy new car, okay, I don't have a flashy new car. But in the case of the right antibiotic, that could kill you, not having the right antibiotic. And so this is the tension that we all have to work around in terms of the cost of new antibiotics, using the new antibiotic when you really need it, and dealing with the cost of the new antibiotic in that context. Not a simple equation. The introduction of things like the pull incentive ideas, things like the Pasteur Act, where the notion is that we as a society at a government level will pay enough to reward the creation of the new antibiotic so that when you need the antibiotic, the use of it isn't that expensive because the cost of getting it to the market and having it in the pharmacy has been covered by a common community levels of support. So the Pasteur Act is in effect the United States government saying, we need to buy these antibiotics and have them available. Might not use them very much, but when we do need them, we really need them. And that's the whole reason why the idea of pull incentives really makes a difference here, because there's not an easy solution to the fact that new antibiotics just necessarily are more expensive. Like, comment, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.